Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin and today I'm going to be doing a mid-month wrap-up for May. I'm going to have to remember how to do these. It feels like so long since I've done any sort of wrap-up, a weekly, a mid-month, a monthly wrap-up. It's been a long time, guys, so bear with me. Let's get started because I did read quite a few books in May. I'm so excited about it. I don't have school anymore, so have lots more free time. We're gonna start with Heir of Fire. So if you are not aware, Jen from the Book Refuge is hosting an SJM read-along where we read all of Sarah J. Maas's books in publication order. So I, for the first time, started reading the Throne of Glass series. I started last month, and Heir of Fire was the first book that I read for the month of May, and we had a live show about it already, so I'll link that down in the description below. This is the first book in the Throne of Glass series that I loved. I was really kind of struggling in the beginning with Celaena's character. Celaena is the main heroine. She is this renowned assassin. She was betrayed, thrown in this prison camp basically, where she was beaten, and then one day someone comes to rescue her saying that, hey, you have a chance to become the king's personal assassin. And we know that something has gone down in her past and somehow the king is involved. Okay, so that is the basic premise of the Throne of Glass series. In Heir of Fire, this is the first time that I liked Celaena's character. This is the first time where I saw character growth, and it was amazing. Amazing to witness. I mean, she definitely had to be beaten down and built back up, and I say that in the nicest way possible. She just was reading as a very young character, and this is a YA series. I don't normally read YA anymore, but this one I just felt like, oh, here we're getting to the real nitty gritty. I also definitely love Fae, so this is our introduction where we got to see some Fae, and we were also away from the castle, which was the setting of the first two books, and I was very bored of that setting, so I was so excited when we had a change of scenery and got to meet some new people. I thought this book was fantastic. I could really see Sarah J. Maas's growth, and I just loved all the fantasy elements in here. I loved some of the creatures we got to see, and it was just fantastic, and it reminded me a lot of what I loved about A Court of Thorns and Roses. Definitely my favorite of the series. I gave this book 5 stars. Oh, also, can we talk about the cover? I don't like the original dust jackets for the Throne of Glass series. I very much don't like the depiction of Celaena. She looks like a waifish ghoul. Why is she all gray in the original? I don't understand it. Okay, but I love the Dusty Shops dust jackets. I bought these and I don't regret them. They're absolutely beautiful, and I love oh, look at that, it's so gorgeous. These are phenomenal, and it's just amazing. Okay, so the next book that I read, I immediately had to jump into the next book, which was Queen of Shadows. And I'm not going to talk about this one too much because we haven't done the live show for it yet. I'm going to obviously go into greater detail of what I liked about Queen of Shadows, but there was definitely a lot of things that I feel like are spoilery that I loved about Queen of Shadows. There's some that I didn't. There's a character that I really loved in books 1 through 3. I liked this character. Some people had problems with this character, and I didn't in the beginning at all. I was very understanding. But in this book, the character makes some decisions that made me not dislike the character, but I was side-eyeing this character a lot for the things that they were saying out of hurt, and I just wanted a better reaction. But there were so much great things that happened, and in true SJM fashion, the greatest things that happened in this book were toward the end. She just knows how to close out a book for sure. I do feel like she meanders a little bit, especially in the middle parts of Queen of Shadows, and I feel like sometimes fantasy authors, when they get really popular, their editors are less inclined to be like, I think you need to trim some stuff out because they're really popular. So if they want to write a longer book, let them write a longer book. So anyway, I just feel like some of it could have been paced a little bit better, but there's some revelations in here that I really loved, and damn the ending. Holy shit, damn that ending. It was awesome, and I feel like we have almost the first act has closed out, and I'm very excited to start Empire of Storms. I'm slowing down though because I'm way ahead of it, because in our SJM read along I was supposed to read A Court of Thorns and Roses after Heir of Fire, but I just couldn't. After the ending of Heir of Fire, it ended on a huge cliffhanger. I was like, I have to immediately jump into Queen of Shadows. So I did, and I don't regret it because I feel like this book ends on a good point where if you want to pause, if you need to take a little break, this is a really good time to take a break after Queen of Shadows. Okay, moving on. Wait, did I say my rating for this? 4.5 stars. Then I wanted to do a little genre shift. This is just how I like to read. If I'm binging a lot of books in the same genre, like the fantasy genre, I have got to switch it up to something else. I've got to go contemporary or historical. So I decided, since I need an audiobook, and I've been listening to Julianne Long's Pennyroyal Green series on Anyplay. They have all of the books in that series. It's a very long running one too. I think there's 11 books, and I've slowly been making my way through. I wanted to read the next one, which is What I Did for a Duke. And I will say this is the main reason why I wanted to read the Pennyroyal Green series, not because I've heard a lot about this book, but because the cover is fucking beautiful. Coverless at work, guys. So What I Did for a Duke, well, the whole entire series focuses on these two families, the Redmonds and the Everseys. They're rivals. So the premise for this one is that Ian Eversey, he's a little bit of a man whore. And one time he decided to sleep with a girl who was engaged to a duke, and he got caught. And the Duke decides to repay the favor by making a plan to court his sister Genevieve and making her like fall in love with him and then just like crying off and stuff like that. And I love this premise because when Alexander Moncrief goes to a house party, the reactions that Ian has in seeing Alexander and like the threats that he's made against him, it creates some very great situational humor, and I enjoyed that a lot. And I really do enjoy that Genevieve is pretty wise to this. Like, she catches on very quickly. Like, I kind of see what you're doing. You think that by paying attention to me, you're going to have your revenge on Ian. And I kind of see through that. And he's refreshed by Genevieve's honesty and her insight. Like, she is a very kind of like innocent character, innocent seeming character. Genevieve has like no scandal attached to her name or anything. And I just love the conversations that they had. And of course, they start kind of sneaking around, and it's kind of like a gradual progression in she discovering her passions. Like, he's way more experienced. She wants to get to know him a little bit better. And Alexander is one of those standoffish heroes where he doesn't want to lay any of his cards on the table. So I just enjoyed this book a lot, but it's not my favorite of the series. I gave this book 4.5 stars, and I think it's a little high. I probably would rate it 4 stars now that I'm thinking back on it, but it was pretty good. Then I read Allscott and Bother by Kerrigan Byrne. This is the first time that I was reading this book. A while back, I was on a live show with Kerrigan Byrne discussing this series when the last book of the series came out. I've only read the last book of the series. So reading the series backwards was pretty interesting because in Allscott and Bothered, there's this looming presence of the Crimson Council, and that gets resolved in the very last book of the series. So I already had all the answers to like, what is the Crimson Council? What are they doing? Who's behind all this? I already had those answers, but I think that Kerrigan Byrne does a really great job with the conflict between the main characters. Of course, the Crimson Council is a plot point, but it's not the main one. Cecilia and Ramsay are opposites, and I love a good opposites attract romance. Cecilia, the prologue for this is pretty heartbreaking, but not the most gut-wrenching that Kerrigan Byrne has ever written. I still count The Hunter as one of the most, like, I'd rather get stabbed in the heart than read the prologue for that again because the trauma that the character has gone through. I was like, ah! Kerrigan Byrne is known for that. Cecilia grew up with a father who was extremely religious, and he blamed her for the mother's sins, as he liked to say. And he also was like very abusive towards her emotionally, and very neglectful. If she was bad, as he liked to say, he would put her in this like basement closet with like barely any food or water, like just like put a bucket down there with like minimal water down there. He thought that she needed to stop eating. He was basically trying to starve her because she had a very voluptuous body. And in the prologue, her latest transgression was getting this math equation right in school, and the teacher claims that there's no way she could have done that because 1, she is young, and 2, she is a girl, and it's impossible. So that's why she's getting punished, but then she gets rescued by somebody that claims that, oh, I knew your mother. So we're going to take you away from here. We're going to threaten him and he's going to sign over your rights and come live with me. She gets to go to this wonderful school where she meets all of her friends and she forms the Red Rogues with her friends because they're all redheads. In the present day, Cecilia has definitely adopted the mindset of life is there to be enjoyed. She loves pleasurable things and she doesn't take any shame in exploring those things. And our hero Ramsey, upon first meeting Cecilia, because he is at the wedding of his half-brother and she's part of the Red Rogues, they're book one, Ramsey cannot help but be fascinated by the way that Cecilia is eating a little like bonbon, a little truffle. He has the exact opposite mindset. He is like, pleasure and excess are the downfall of humanity, and he would rather be like stoic, and he's very strict on himself. Like he does not want to drink in excess, eat in excess, and definitely not be drawn in by a woman just because of her like sexual attraction. So I really love how he's drawn into her, and there's a situation where Cecilia inherits this school for girls, but the actual main part of this business is a gaming hell where the women actually work. So this was owned by her aunt, who was her benefactor, her secret benefactor. And apparently her aunt was under siege by none other than Ramsey. So Ramsey comes to call when Cecilia is now the new owner. He doesn't know this, so she's in disguise, and the way that he treats her then is just like so opposite from how he was at her friend's wedding. And so it was just very interesting to see that dynamic. I love a good secret identity as well. And then there's the mystery of some missing girls. And that's why Ramsey is investigating Cecilia's gaming hell, because he believes that it's a cover for nefarious deeds and she's behind, or the whole operation and her aunt was behind capturing young girls and then selling them. So I love the way that this played out. This was fantastic. I gave this book 5 stars. Next are my books that I read for the Mafia Romance Readathon. Now I started to do a vlog and then I completely fell off from vlogging because I forgot how to really vlog. I just was bad at vlogging during the Mafia Romance Readathon, so let's talk about what I read. First book I read was Savage Tracker by Maggie Cole. This is a series that I had started a while back. I kind of got bored. The first 3 books feel very repetitive. The plot points are very similar, and I didn't really like it. So I took a break. Before the Mafia Romance Readathon, Jen recommended me to skip book 4 and just go straight to book 5 because the story was different from the first 3 books. This couple, Selena and Obrecht, have kind of been in the background for a couple of books, so I was familiar with their characters. Selena was in a horribly abusive marriage, and one of the previous heroines in a previous book was her lawyer and got her a divorce settlement. So now Selena is recovering from that past trauma. She's living in an apartment and she's like, oh, finally I can be my own person, but she's struggling a little bit. She's struggling. She doesn't really have any friends. She's originally from Greece, so she has no connections. Her family disowned her once she married her horrible husband. And the Ivanovs kind of feel protective of Selena, so Obrecht lives in the same building and he's kind of in charge of like kind of bodyguard duty, and he's keeping an eye out for her. He also really is attracted to her. So when she gets a sink delivery, a new sink delivery, one that she's always wanted, when she and her ex-husband were redoing their penthouse or apartment or whatever, he like refused to let her have things that she wanted. So this is one step to reclaim her independence, and she wants her damn sink. So it's delivered and he offers to install it for her. Now her initial reaction is very interesting and almost a little bit triggering for her, because her relationship with her ex-husband was a very toxic dom-sub relationship. He basically treated her like a slave. It was very unhealthy, lots of non-consensual things going on, and she thinks that that is just kind of like a normal dom-sub relationship, but she thinks that something's wrong with her because she still craves that dynamic with somebody who's more dominant, and she likes to be submissive, and she thinks that makes her really messed up. And when she meets Obrecht, she has like an innate sense of like, I want to kneel for him. So this is a book that has heavy BDSM elements. And I think that overall, this book is really great at dealing with Selena's trauma. And Obrecht is the perfect person to help her recover. He is the most patient, most kind, the best thing that it could ever happen to Selena, because he is also into the lifestyle. He likes being a dominant, and he is trying to unravel all of these terrible things that her ex-husband has instilled in her that she thinks is normal, but it's not. It was abuse. It was terrible. It was terribly tragic what happened to her, and he has to tell her that is not normal. You have a right to say that you like things. You have a right to say that you don't want to do things. And if you don't want to do things, if you say no, your partner should back off like immediately. And that's what it means to have a true dom-sub relationship. I also really enjoyed that Maggie Cole involved a therapist in this situation. So Selena does see a therapist. And I think that Maggie Cole did an excellent job with that. The only reason why I didn't love this book is because I'm not a real big fan of BDSM, like heavy BDSM elements. I don't mind couples exploring like kinky things, but a true like dom sub relationship is not something that really like gets me going. I used to read BDSM elements. I think everybody read some BDSM stuff after 50 Shades of Grey, but it's just not something that I gravitate to anymore. So though the book was fine, I just was uninterested in it overall, besides the fact that I was like, thank God these two found each other because they're really perfect for each other. So anyway, it just was not my cup of tea. So I personally gave it 3 stars. That doesn't mean that it's a bad book. Next, I read Tears of Salvation by Michelle Hurd. I've been hearing about Michelle Hurd a lot in the lead up to the Mafia Romance Readathon. She's a new to me author, and I thought I was gonna try her out. Now, this book was released with the Kings of the Underworld. It's not a series. It's just like a bunch of authors were writing and releasing a book under the umbrella of Kings of the Underworld. But in Tears of Salvation is actually part of Michelle Hurd's series. It was called St. Monarch's Academy, but I think that she's rebranding it to be the Saints series. And this is actually the last book in the series, but I think it stands up well as a standalone, honestly. So our hero, Alexei, he is newly the head of the Bratva, and he's like one of the most powerful. And his rival is actually a woman who's head of the Colombian cartel. Alexei has some suspicions that, oh my gosh, I forgot the mob boss lady's name. It's either Sophia or Sonia, something like that. He has a suspicion that she is secretly moving in on his territory, and he needs to find proof about that. He also absolutely hates anybody who deals in sex trafficking. He does not do that, and he does not want that happening in his territory at all. So the first part of this book happens around like Halloween, and they're having a Halloween party. He dresses up in the Day of the Dead makeup, and our heroine, Isabella, who is the daughter of mob boss lady, Colombian cartel lady, she secretly is fighting back against her mother's involvement in the human trafficking business, and she is secretly like a vigilante. She also goes to this Halloween party and she runs into Alexei. They don't know each other's identity at all. They're just drawn to each other, and they have like a one-night stand. Well, months later, when Alexei's like, okay, I gotta move in on this mob boss lady, that's just what we're gonna call her with an S name that I can't remember, retaliate, and so I'm going to put her compound under surveillance. And that's how he finds out that the daughter Isabella, who projects this outward image of this kind of like bubblehead socialite who doesn't have a care, definitely does not want any involvement in the mafia lifestyle at all. He sees her sneak out at night and change clothes and then disrupt one of her mom's cargo shipments of humans and rescues people. And he's just like, huh, interesting. I think I could use this to my advantage. So anyway, I really like this dynamic. I thought it was really fun. It did have an element that I was kind of worried about. It's kind of a little bit of a spoiler because it happens more than midway through the book, but I was very unsure when an author introduced this trope, this element. I was like, I don't know if I like this, but I think it was handled well, actually. So I ended up by giving this book 4.5 stars. I liked it. It was a great first start to Michelle Hurd. Next, I read Run, Posey, Run by Kate C. Wells. I had been binging Kate C. Wells ever since I started her Tyrant Alpha Rejected Mate, that series, the Rejected Mate series. Really loved it. Very amazing. Run, Posey, Run was like very popular last year. Jen has been trying to get me to read it, and so finally I was like, this is a perfect time. Now, what makes this book interesting is that the hero and heroine are already in a relationship at the beginning of this book. Posey, who her dad is a disgraced mafioso in the Italian mob, or a small outfit of the Italian mob, obviously. There's different factions. Anyway, so her dad was disgraced, but she's always kind of been in the life, and she has picked boyfriends who are not so great. But currently she's dating Dario, and she's like, this is going real well. I like who I'm with. It's just another normal night for her, but his right-hand man basically says like he wants to see you in his office, and Dario accuses her of cheating on him because he has video evidence. Apparently there's a video going around throughout the entire like faction, the mob, of Posey getting reamed by this other guy. And she's trying to say that it happened years ago, that this was many years ago. I've never cheated on you, but Dario is so cold, and he turned into somebody that she doesn't really know. She doesn't recognize this person, this very cold, callous person who calls her a whore and everything. And he basically kicks her out, takes everything that she has, and drops her off. Not long after, his boss, because Dario is the money man, he's so good at making this outfit a ton of cash. When he gets this visit from the head guy's like, oh, well, she's a loose end. We're just gonna have to kill her. Suddenly Dario's like, wait, hold up. Like, I had thoughts of killing her, but somebody else killing her? Like, no, nobody gets to kill her except me. This is a psychopath romance, and I loved Dario's mindset. So it turns into a captor-captive romance. I love the fact that Posey was just kind of like, okay, I'm resourceful if I need to be, and she does get away for a little while, but of course he brings her back, and that's what makes this book so great, because this couple already had a dynamic, and it wasn't great. It wasn't a real relationship, and Posey had convinced herself that this was enough, and he kind of makes her confront these hard truths like, you were settling. You were settling. You never told me when you didn't like a thing. Just because I liked a thing, you went along with it. Like, what does that make you? Like, don't look at me like I'm the monster. You're willing to marry somebody who you didn't know. So I loved the way that Dario had to grovel. And I feel like this is kind of a hallmark of Kate C. Wells. She loves her heroes to fuck up and have to get back in the heroine's good graces. Now, this is a lot different because Dario just has the upper hand the whole time, just as like, you're not escaping, you have to be near me. So it's forced proximity, and he has to change the way that he approached the relationship. The things that he has done with Posey in the past to make her happy no longer make her happy, because she sees through that. She's like, you never really cared about me. You got your secretary basically to get to know me, bought my presents, and I was thinking they were all from you, that you were thoughtful and you knew me, but you really didn't. You don't care about me. So he has to start learning about her. And I loved it. I loved that he was forced to do that. So I give this book 5 stars. It was beautiful. Next, I read Dark Queen by Cara Duki. I'm not gonna linger on this. It had an interesting premise to start. I'm kind of a little bit fascinated by like a mafia mob boss guy and a ballerina, because I love Stolen Air by Sophie Lark. It's a really good book. So when I read the synopsis for it, I was like, it's giving me those vibes. Let me try it out. And I never read Cara Duki before. It starts off promising. Alyssa is trying to escape her hometown after her mom dies. Her one chance is getting into this academy, and she goes to try out, but then she finds out that it's kind of already decided which girls are going to get in, even though it's like open auditions. Like, you have to have connections to be in here. And on her way out, she's very upset. She runs into this guy, and she's drinking from her water bottle, and when she runs into him, her lip gets busted. If you've never had somebody like hit you when you're trying to drink out of something, I have had that happen, and it hurts. Anyway, she is a little bit sassy, and he is unrepentant, and he's so fascinated by this girl that he decides to make sure that she gets in, because he has lots of money, he has lots of connections, he's a donor, and he just has like this moment of weakness to get her in there. Now, on Luca's side of things, he's in the Italian mob, and things are going kind of downhill for him. There's been a couple of events that are shady. Most recently, his mistress / she was really a stripper, so not really his mistress, but that was just his favorite, has been murdered in his own strip joint. So he needs to figure out who has done this, because it feels like an attack on him personally. But also, his mother died in a mugging. Seems very shady. And then his cousin's wife also died, and we don't know like what exactly happened. So there's just lots of stuff going on. I was interested in this dynamic because Luca's fascination with Alyssa, he didn't understand why he was so fascinated with her. And his cousin was kind of like teasing him about it. And it seemed like his cousin was purposely throwing them together because he enjoyed seeing Luca squirm. It's an age gap romance as well. And I really felt like it had potential, and it just kind of like spiraled from there. It was so messy and disjointed, and the book was a mess. So I gave this book 3 stars. Then I read Mafia Mistress, and Mafia Darling. So I'm going to talk about these two books together. I don't want to talk about Mafia Darling because it's the second part of a duet, and it'll give away some spoilers. So Mafia Mistress, I heard a lot about this. Jen had initially read it and disliked the first book, and then read Mafia Darling and decided, oh wait, no, I actually do like this duet. So I got to hear all of her thoughts beforehand, and I decided to put it on my TBR for the Mafia Romance Readathon because I just wanted to see what would my reactions be. This is a taboo age gap romance between Francesca and Fausto. Francesca lives in the United States, and she has turned 18 and believes that she's going to go off to college. Her mom, who was like a model or whatever, from Italy, she'd always instilled in her daughters, like, make sure that you get to do stuff that you want to do. Like, you don't just have to be married at 18 and have babies and stuff. And she thought that her dad understood that. Well, no, because when her dad gets in a pickle and needs to be bailed out, he offers up one of his daughters. And Francesca has to marry Fausto's son, Giulio. So Fausto is the one that comes to the US to pick her up. She tries to run away, and he's like, not happening. So it's kind of captive. He brings her all the way to Italy. He's like, you will marry my son. Now, I had a lot of fun with this. Like I said, I knew what was happening beforehand. I knew that there was going to be lots of like physical attraction between them. Fausto's very fixated on how breathtakingly gorgeous she is. And there was rumors of like her beauty because of her mom. Obviously, her mom was a model, and apparently she passed all that on to Francesca, who is extremely well endowed, and he likes to comment on her boobs a lot. So that could be a little bit off-putting because of like just the level of leering that he does. And the reason why this is taboo is because obviously Francesca's supposed to be marrying his son Giulio, and he has a crush on her. And the way that he's like so protective and so possessive of her whenever he should not be at all, it creates humorous situations. So I thought this was honestly really great. I gave this book 4 stars, and there's a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end of this one, some conflict going on with the couple, and then it wraps up in Mafia Darling. There's also some interesting elements because secretly Giulio is actually gay, and Francesca finds this out. And being gay in the Mafia is not accepted in this world. So there's some very interesting father-son dynamics going on in here as well that I think were really great. I loved it. So yeah, I gave both of the books 4 stars. I think it's definitely worth the read. Then I had another readathon happening right after that. It was a historic romance readathon, and I read some pretty great books. The Lion's Lady was the group pick by Julie Garwood. I love this cover. I've been having it forever, and I like when I actually get to read something off my historical romance shelf because I am definitely a collector of historical romance. I probably read a very small percentage of what's on that shelf. So it's just nice to knock one off my list. I like Julie Garwood. Most of her books are pretty decent to me. She wrote a lot of them, a lot of her historicals in the late 80s and then the 90s. And I really love The Secret. So that's kind of like the standard to which I hold all Julie Garwood's books. So I try not to have a lot of expectations going in with The Lion's Lady, but it really surprised me, especially with its interesting premise. Because the heroine, Christina, we have this prologue where she's the daughter of this woman named Jennifer or Jessica, I can't remember. I'm so good with names. She actually ran away from England to America, and she ends up by helping this Native American woman who had been captured by like a rival tribe. And then she tragically dies, but she had formed the friendship with this Native American woman. And so Mary is her name, Mary takes Christina back, who she's a 2-year-old girl, and she takes her back when she returns to her own tribe. She's of their Dakota Native Americans. She's a little bit wary because her husband definitely does not like white people. He's like, they're evil. But she has promised her friend that she would take care of Christina, just like she takes care of her son, her 6-year-old son. So her husband and her dad is the chief of that Dakota tribe. They thought she was dead. So they're very happy when she comes back, and they're very willing to take her back into the fold, except now she has this white baby. And they're just like, don't know about that. But the shaman has had a vision, and it was all very fascinating. The prologue told through Mary's point of view, and I really enjoyed that. And it was very interesting because her task, Mary's task as an adopted mother, was to raise Christina because her father is dangerous. And her mother wanted Christina to grow up with a strong mindset. And then once she was strong in her beliefs, strong in character, she left these journals for her to read, and then she wanted her to return to the fold to claim her birthright in England. So that's where our heroine meets our hero. Lion is the Marquess of Lionwood, so that's nickname Lion. And he's fascinated by this new debutante, that she's a long lost princess. Apparently her father was this king of this minor like German nation, which is since the monarchy has been deposed. And he and his friend kind of have a little bet, because his friend tried to talk to her. He's like, man, I was listening to your conversation. She never answered one single thing, one single question you directed to her. She never fully gave you an answer. She's very great at redirecting the questions and saying nothing at all. And so his friend is like, well, I don't think you could do any better. And Lion's like, okay, watch me. He tries. He also gets shut down by Christina, and he's just like, oh, damn. I think I'm a little bit in love. But of course he doesn't think he's in love, but he's very fascinated by her. I enjoyed this a lot. I definitely give a little bit of leeway to historical romances that were written a couple decades ago. Doesn't have the same feel as a modern historical romance, but I very much enjoyed it. So I gave the book 4 stars. Well, 3.5, and I rounded up to 4. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't bad. Then I read Sweet Lullaby, which is a Western by Lorraine Heath, and it was really great. The heroine falls pregnant. She's the daughter of this rancher, falls pregnant, and the dad basically is just kind of like, well, I was going to leave all my business to you, because she's really good at running a ranch. She likes to be very involved, and her father's let her. And he's like, well, not if you're going to be this disgraced mother who's unwed. So he basically approaches one of his ranch hands, Jake, who is so sweet. He's one of the sweetest heroes I've read, and tells him, like, I want you to marry my daughter. And Jake doesn't think he's worthy enough to marry Rebecca, but they are friendly, and he does offer to marry her. Now, she's in love with the person who impregnated her, but he's gone. She believes that he will return, but her father's giving her an ultimatum that she doesn't have time. Like, Brett, her baby daddy, is not going to return before she has the baby, if he returns at all. So she does decide to marry Jake, but she's also seen her father's true colors, and she doesn't like them. So she decides, hey, Jake, remember whenever you told me about that land you had in Texas? I think we should go there and start our own ranch. And her father is so pissed off at that. So this is like a friends to lovers romance between Jake and Rebecca. And oh God, breaks my heart. This book made me sob. It was really good. It was really good. I gave this book 4.5 stars. Then I read How the Marquess Was Won by Julianne Long, continuing with that Pennyroyal Green series. And this is interesting because the romance does not involve directly in Eversea or Redmond, which all the previous books have in the past. Julian, Marquess of Dryden, his father had lost like all their money and sold off all the land that wasn't entailed. And Julian has spent his life as the Marquess trying to correct all of that, trying to build up their coffers again, and then he wants all the land back that his father sold off. And there's one piece of the puzzle left, one piece of land, but it's connected to a dowry. So he has to court Elizabeth Redmond. And on the way to a house party to court Elizabeth Redmond, he's in the little like haberdashery place or whatever, he meets this lady named Phoebe. Now, Phoebe has tutored Elizabeth, and he doesn't know this, has tutored Elizabeth before, and she has received an invitation from Phoebe saying that, hey, I want you to come to this house party that I'm having. My parents aren't there, and it'd be nice to have somebody my own age who could kind of chaperone me type of thing. And initially she was going to refuse, but once she has an interaction with Julian, whose nickname is like the Iceman because he's so stoic, and like society is so fascinated with everything that he does. Everything that he does becomes a trend, and she's only read about him in papers. So meeting him in person, getting actually to speak with him, they have a good conversation. There's lots of banter going on, and she can't get enough of that. So she decides to accept that invitation. And when she accepts the invitation, she's very dismayed to find out that Julian is courting Elizabeth. And all of a sudden, Elizabeth kind of treats her a little bit like a servant, not like a friend, like she thought, because they're very close in age. It's just interesting because there's like all these secret feelings, secret meetings, and I enjoyed that a lot. And one thing I don't like about Julianne Long is that she prolongs her conflict until the very end. And I wish that there would be more time that the hero and the heroine spend with each other, not butting heads or unintentionally hurting each other. And it's just kind of like a theme with this series. And I'm still enjoying it, but definitely kind of feeling the burnout because it all follows the same kind of pattern. so far, but I still enjoyed this one and I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book, A Notorious Countess Confesses, had the most interesting premise. I loved this premise where the heroine, Evie Dugan, she has lifted herself up from poverty. She is originally from Ireland. She has a lot of siblings, and when her parents left and died young, she was in charge of all of them. She had to do some things in order to make sure that she took care of her brothers and sisters that were considered unsavory. She became an actress. At one point she was a courtesan, and then somehow she landed this earl. She was very surprised that the earl actually married her, so she became a countess. And so she has a notorious reputation. She wants to start over, and she goes to this small town, Pennyroyal Green. She falls asleep during the sermon, and the vicar, Adam Eversey, notices this. He notices how all of his parishioners basically shun her. And so Evie Dugan does go to Adam, and she apologizes for falling asleep during a sermon, and she makes a confession of her own. And Adam just like dreads all his parishioners giving him their confessions because he's like, oh goodness, I know so much about these people. And so when she goes to confess, he's like, oh Lord. She actually confesses that she does not regret anything that she's done in the past, but she really desires friends. So she has a very vulnerable moment with Adam, and he can't help but be drawn to her. And he decides to come up with a plan where he convinces this society of ladies that it would be a good idea to envelop Evie into the fold and kind of be good Christians and give her a second chance. Evie does have to work to be accepted, but I do like how she doesn't totally like conform. She's still herself, and she's still very unabashedly not ashamed of her past. She never apologizes for that. And sometimes she enjoys shocking them, so that was really fun. But I feel like they hurt each other too much. I feel like Adam and Evie hurt each other too much in this book. And so this is one instance where I was really feeling like, Julianne Long, we can do something different. I gave this book 4 stars, even though I really loved the premise of it. It just didn't land well. She didn't stick the landing for me. And then lastly, I decided to reread Kate Daniels. When I went to the beach, I don't know, I just was in the mood for a reread, and I was like, I haven't read Kate Daniels in a very long time. So I always start my reread of Kate Daniels with book 3 because I feel like this is where the authors found their stride in the series. This is where it really picks up, and I love magic strikes. Kate discovers that one of her good friends, Derek, who she calls her teenage werewolf sidekick, he has been getting into trouble. And she's like, well, why are you getting into trouble? Like, what's going on? And apparently there are these kind of gladiator games called the Midnight Games, which the local, basically king of the shifters, Curran, has forbidden anybody to attend. And Derek needs tickets to attend because he wants to save this girl. And he's just like, this girl is part of this team, and she doesn't really want to be, like, they're rumored to basically, like, you have to sacrifice someone to be a part of their group. She just is getting in over her head, and I really need to speak with her. Well, Kate has an opportunity to actually go as a bodyguard to the Midnight Games with Simon. I don't know if I ever say his name correctly, but that's how I pronounce it. And she delivers the message to this girl who's not really receptive. She just like, tell Derek to leave me alone. But she feels like something more sinister is going on here, and she's afraid for Derek, thinks that he's in danger. She is too late to rescue him, and he ends up by getting attacked. He doesn't die, but he gets attacked, and Kate wants vengeance for that. There's also been some mysterious shifter deaths, and apparently Curran is not privy to that. So she kind of teams up with Jem, who is Curran's right-hand man and his security chief, and she's kind of like, okay, what's going on? Give me the download on the Midnight Games. Like, what is happening here? So I really love the runaround that Kate gives Curran in this one. You can really see their romance actually start to develop in here, where there was only been like hints of it in books 1 and book 2. This was where I feel like it really kicks off, and we start to see some sparks fly, because this series is a slow burn romance. They don't get together in the beginning. It takes a while for them to get together. They don't even get together in here, really. I love this book because the gladiator stuff is so fun, and then we get more about Kate's secret, mysterious origins. So, love this book, 5 stars. Then the next one, Magic Bleeds. Woo! This one's fun. I love this one. I can't get too much into detail because we are getting into like the midway point of the series. We're approaching that, but there is this new entity in town that Kate has to investigate, a Steel Mary. So she spreads these kind of like plagues. And I absolutely love the lore that Ilona Andrews has incorporated into this book. Ilona Andrews is a husband and wife writing duo, and Ilona is actually from Russia, and she brings a lot of like Slavic and Eastern mythology to her books, this series, Kate Daniels, and I love it because I learned so much about things that I've never read in any other book. So anyway, I just really loved how she incorporates mythology and makes them magical. I love the team up. We finally get real relationship progress in this book, which is why this book is so great. And the history, you really get some history with Kate in here. Very great progress. It is fantastic. So this book is also 5 stars. And then I read Magic Slays, which is the next book in the series, and I didn't grab it, and I'm not gonna go get up to go get it. Now, Magic Slays isn't one of my like super favorites of the series. I actually originally, while I was reading this series, I don't know how, but I missed this book. I went from Magic Bleeds to Magic Rises, I think. Completely skipping this book. And I was wondering why. I was like, man, I feel like I missed something. Maybe I just wasn't reading that closely. Nope, I skipped the whole book. So, but anyway, I ended up by reading it once I realized my mistake. And though I think that this book has so many interesting things about it, it's not my favorite of the series. But Kate is investigating this kind of weapon of mass magic destruction that has been secretly developed by the scientists. And it's very dangerous because when this weapon is being used by this faction who's very anti-magic, like they just want, they're a group of like humans or people who have been affected negatively by magic, and they're using this weapon to strip magic from like a vicinity where the weapon's being used. And this is very dangerous because one of the first instances where Kate's like, something's going on, something's wrong, a navigator, a necromancer, loses control of a vampire. Now, vampires are just kind of like mindless creatures who will like destroy and eat anything. And that is very dangerous because you could have mass casualties if a vampire is on the loose with nobody actually navigating them. So most of the book focuses on the mystery of like, who's building it? Who's behind this? Where are they? And we have to get them before they build a bigger machine to basically wipe out Atlanta, all the magic in Atlanta, which means like everybody who's magical beings would be affected, including shifters. So the most interesting aspect of this story involves Kate's ward, Julie. And that was the missing piece of the puzzle when I was reading Magic Rises. I was like, I was like, when did that happen? But that's all answered in here. That was the most fascinating stuff to happen. Also, there's a really cute and mischievous teenage Buddha, which is a hyena shifter that is introduced in this book, and I loved him. He's fun. Okay, so that is all the books that I read for the first half of May. Now, since this is a little bit later in May that I'm recording this, there has been other books, but this video is probably already very long, and I'm going to save all the books that I've read for this past week for my second half of May. And I'm actually going to try to do a weekly wrap up, so in a couple of days you might get another video from me wrapping it up. I'm trying to get on a better schedule, guys. I'm trying. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed today's wrap up, and if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye, guys.